Thank you, Chairman Cassidy, for your kind words. I also want to extend my heartfelt thanks to the entire Board of Trustees for your extraordinary service to this great institution. Will you please join me in a round of applause for our Board of Trustees? Thank you so much. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My presence here today is a testament to the power and promise of community. That community includes my late parents, whose infinite love and steadfast commitment was the rock and springboard of my life journey from Bombay, India to Middle America. It also includes my beloved wife, Jennifer. You are my dearest friend and my safe harbor. You make me always want to be a better man. And to our 3 children, Madeline, Rui, and Robert, you fill us with immense pride, and you are the joy of our hearts. Over the years, I've been blessed with a steady stream of amazing teachers, mentors, colleagues, neighbors, friends, and students, many of whom are here today. Thank you for being here. All of you have deepened my values, broadened my perspective, and nurtured my growth. To all of you who shaped who I am, how I think, and why I lead, I want to say in the most profound and humble way possible, thank you. Today I want to focus my message on culture. And these days, it's hard to find an organization that's not talking about culture. How to fix the bad, how to grow the good, how to eat strategy for breakfast. It's worth noting that before culture became a buzzword, in everything from business to sports to politics, it was the muse of the academy. If higher education is the leading voice on the study of culture, one may presume that we've got our own house in order, that the culture we have on campus is precisely the culture we want, that our success happens because of our culture, not despite of it. Truth be told, our reality is much more complicated. We've been so busy studying culture out there that we've missed opportunities to refine the culture in here, inside the academy. Before I get too far into this message, let me state a simple truth. I know with confidence that I'll remember this moment, this eternal moment right here, right now, for the rest of my life. Your faces, my family, our hope, these words, that feeling, this transcendence, they will forever play in my mind like a drive-in movie. But I also know with confidence that it won't be the same for you. You'll only remember part of this day, and decidedly less of my speech. And that's okay, because you have your own eternal moments to remember. But if you recall one thing from this message, I hope it is this. To my core, I believe that organizations are at their best when the culture is owned, not rented. Let me repeat that. Organizations are at their best when the culture is owned, not rented. So what does it mean to rent a culture. I compare it to renting a property. As renters, we can be self-serving, short-sighted, and detached. We can let the sink drip, the flowers die, and the neighbors go unmet. Every problem belongs to somebody else. Every decision is based on a short-term payoff. And every interaction is at bottom a transaction. In short, renting puts the burden of responsibility outside ourselves. Owning a property is just the opposite. We don't have the luxury of walking past a wet ceiling. We can't allow the furnace to remain broken because we're moving out next month. And we can't simply ignore the neighbors until we need their help. That's because owning demands both action and accountability. Action and accountability. It requires us to make tough decisions, to sacrifice wants for needs, to invest in long-term solutions, to care about those around us, and to get beyond simply being in charge in order to take charge too. In short, owning puts the burden of responsibility on us. At this point, you may be wondering, how can we tell if an organizational culture is owned or rented? Several signs may demonstrate this distinction, but I tend to look for 3 habits in particular. First, it's a culture where every person counts and can be counted on to go the extra mile. Second, it's a culture that cares more about people than process. And third, it's a culture that faithfully marries excellence to impact. Let me speak briefly to each. When I think of a culture where every person counts and can be counted on to go the extra mile, I think of Professor Robert Del Camp. When I started my faculty career, I had the privilege of working with Professor Del Camp, who had been teaching at UC since 1945. He made it his mission to know every student in the department by name. Plus, he remembered their personal stories and never missed the opportunity to ask about their experience. Even after they graduated, Professor Del Camp went out of his way to keep them informed, engaged and excited about what was happening on campus. Equally impressive was his dedication to mentoring junior faculty, especially naive ones like me. In short, despite his humility, Professor Del Camp was the glue that held together so many critical parts of the department and college. So much so, in fact, that many of us wondered how we'd survive following his retirement. There's an old saying, to the world, you may be one person, but to the person, you may be the world. That was the type of culture that Professor Del Camp cultivated every single day. The second habit of a culture that's owned is one that cares more about people than process. Here my mind goes back to a former dean of engineering by the name of Konstantin Papadakis, who I knew as Taki. Back in the mid-1980s, Taki realized that underrepresented minorities were finding the doors of opportunity to engineering mostly closed. Rather than simply accept this inequity, he set out to change both the conversation and the outcome. With the help of Ed Prather and others, the Emerging Ethnic Engineers Program, also known as E3, took flight. Decades before the term student success became a buzzword in education, E3 was blazing a trail. And now, 29 years later, E3 is one of UC's best success stories. With more than 500 alumni, the program's graduation rate is 18% higher than the national average. Plus 2 graduates of the program, Dr. Whitney Gaskin and Dr. Michael Alexander Ramus, now serve as faculty members in the college. From my perspective, E3 was never allowed process or protocol to get in the way of serving people. The third habit of a culture that's owned is one that faithfully marries excellence to impact. 50 years ago, someone had the vision to create a first-class transplant and hepatobiliary surgery program here at UC. A teaching and training program that gives life-saving care and game-changing optimism to patients with deadly conditions. Back in 2004, that hope meant everything to a patient facing a 5% chance of surviving liver cancer. I know because that patient was me. My initial prognosis at the time was dire. And so the future seemed to shrink from decades to days. But then I went to see Dr. Stephen Rudich here at UC, a world-class surgical oncologist and scholar in the science and treatment of liver cancer. What made Dr. Rudich so remarkable was that he did more than simply look at CAT scans and MRIs. He asked my wife and me about our 3 children. He then said, "Don't worry, I'll take care of this." That single statement from one human to another meant more to us than all that medical science had to offer. Because for the first time, we felt we had an ally, and with that ally, a real grip on hope. In a word, Dr. Rudich saved my life. He saved my family. Looking back, he also taught me a profound lesson about drive and success. Namely, that a claim without impact means little and redeems even less. Taken together, these 3 habits may seem interesting, but unrelated. For me, the connection is crystal clear. All 3 carry a common thread, and that's a bias toward action. And perhaps, in the end, that's the most defining characteristic of a culture that's owned. Above all, it's a culture that's felt. It's a culture baptized in glue. It's a culture addicted to verbs. It's a culture made farm to table fresh by us, by making we before me the primary ingredient. In closing, I want to register the historical significance of this ceremony. When I see the number 30 behind my name, I am both humbled and inspired by the 29 presidents who paved the way for me to stand in front of you today. Each of them, in their own way, took charge in making UC a remarkably better institution, in transforming this campus from a house to a home. That pride of ownership can be felt deeply to this day. Perhaps the best way I can honor their leadership and legacy is to partner with each of you to help make our culture and that enduring pride of ownership to the next level. Now, that's simple to say and easy to imagine, but we all know that bettering our best can be a daring and demanding journey. Instead of starting with a step, let's lead with a leap. Let's commit to ourselves and to each other that today is the day. Today is the day in which we broaden the authorship of change. Today is the day in which each and every one of us owns this culture, our home, in bigger, bolder, and more meaningful ways. I want to end with a story that's always struck me as timely and timeless. 3 bricklayers were working on a construction site. All 3 are asked the same question: what are you doing? The first says, I'm laying bricks. The second says, I'm building a wall. And the third says, I'm creating a cathedral. The lesson here is one of purpose and perspective. For the first, it's a job. For the second, it's a career. But for the third, it's a calling. And it's that sense of calling that empowers the third bricklayer to discern this deeper truth. That grand visions start with the true grit and humble gains of our everyday actions. It's with this big picture understanding of purpose and perspective that I leave you not with an answer, but with a question. If our culture were powered by our calling, what kind of cathedral could we create for UC's next century? And would this cathedral enable us to inspire the next Albert Sabin, Marianne Spencer, or Kathleen Battle? To make Cincinnati the next Silicon Valley for innovation and talent attraction? To have the future of the Urban Public Research University be written by us rather than for us? For us to be the poet instead of the poem? And while I don't have the answers, let me say that I can't think of a better community to partner with to live these questions to action. Thank you for all that you do for this beloved institution, and go Bearcats!